I moved to Ashford, Ohio in 2018. One of those towns you drive through without realizing you've already passed it. 2 diners, 1 post office, and a museum that everyone swore was the pride of the county, the Ashford Historical Museum. It used to be the old courthouse, back when people still wore bonnets and took their portraits with rifles. I got a job there mostly by accident. The librarian's cousin was the curator, and they needed someone part-time in the gift shop. The first day, I noticed the smell before anything else, that sweet, dusty scent of paper and varnish mixed with something faintly metallic, like blood on old pennies. The building creaked even when no one was walking. Every sound seemed to echo longer than it should have. Around closing, I went to lock the glass door that led from the shop into the main exhibit hall. It was one of those old brass latches that slides up into a groove. I locked it, checked it twice, and turned off the lights. The next morning, it was wide open. I figured maybe the curator, Mr. Danner, had come in early, but he swore he hadn't. We both laughed about it, probably just the old wood shifting, he said. But the next night, it happened again, and again the next night. Always that same door, always unlatched. On the 4th evening, I decided to stay late. I sat behind the counter with a thermos of coffee, pretending to balance receipts, while the lights dimmed automatically in the exhibit halls. The silence thickened until I could hear my own heartbeat. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the latch clicked. Not loudly, just a soft, deliberate click. When I went to check, the door was open maybe an inch. Beyond it, in the dark hall, I could see the reflection of the exit sign glinting off the glass cases. But something else shimmered too. Movement, slow and human-shaped. I whispered, "Hello?" and immediately regretted it. The air shifted, and the smell of old metal hit stronger. Then, very faintly, I heard what sounded like a shuffle of feet across marble, but not in any direction that made sense, like someone pacing in place. I closed the door. This time, I didn't lock it. I just whispered, "Okay, you can have it." The next morning, the curator asked if I'd mind opening the East Wing for a new display. The sign said Ashford County Artifacts, 1890 to 1923. The first piece I saw inside was a brass latch, almost identical to the one on the shop door. There was a tag beneath it that read, "Recovered from the original courthouse fire. Belonged to the jury room. Found still latched." And right below that, in smaller handwriting, maybe added later, someone had scribbled, "All 12 never made it out." The East Wing always felt colder than the rest of the building. Not bad heating cold, more like the kind that sits inside your chest, the kind you carry out with you. The walls were lined with oil portraits of Ashford's founding families, the coal barons, the judge, the banker's wife who supposedly died of melancholia. Their faces had that washed-out quality from too many years under museum lights, colors fading, eyes dull, but still watching. Mr. Danner said my main task that day was dusting the frames. "Gentle strokes," he said, handing me a microfiber cloth like it was sacred. "Some of these are older than the building itself." The first few portraits were fine, just dusty. But when I reached the far end of the hall, I noticed one that didn't belong. It wasn't cataloged like the others. No brass nameplate, no protective glass. The frame was darker, almost blackened, and the canvas itself looked wrong. The paint was uneven, like it had been redone several times. The figure was a man in old-fashioned clothes, sitting stiffly in a high-backed chair. His face was pale and sharp, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were painted so vividly they seemed wet, reflective. There was no record of him in the archive list. I checked twice. That night, I locked up as usual, double-checking that the east wing door was secure. On my way out, I passed the front desk where the security monitor flickered. 4 grainy camera feeds, one for the lobby, one for the gift shop, one for the archives, and one for the east wing. In the east wing feed, the man's portrait was gone, just the empty wall and the faint outline of where it had hung. I froze. My brain tried to rationalize, maybe glare, maybe interference, but the other cameras were clear. When I blinked, the picture cut again. The frame was back, but now the angle of the man's head had changed, slightly. His gaze seemed fixed straight into the lens. The monitor went black for 2 seconds, and when it came back, all 4 feeds showed the same image, that man's face filling the screen. Too close. The static almost looked like it was crawling across his skin. I slammed the power button, but it didn't respond. I had to pull the plug out of the wall. The screens went dark instantly, but when I turned to leave, I could see my reflection in the front doors, and behind me, in the glass, just over my shoulder, that faint, wet glint of eyes. I didn't go back for 3 days. Told Mr. Danner I had the flu. When I finally did return, the portrait was back where it should be, nameplate newly installed. It read, Judge Henry P. Lark, 1849 to 1903, and underneath, in fine print, donated anonymously, 2018. That's the same year I started working there, and the same year they finally found human remains in the basement, in what used to be the old jury room. By the 3rd week, I'd stopped trying to explain things to anyone. The curator was nice enough, but I could tell he thought I was just adjusting to old building noises. Every creak, every soft slam of the radiator pipes, he had a perfectly reasonable answer. But the human brain knows the difference between sound and presence, between wood contracting and someone standing right behind you, breathing shallowly. It was a Friday evening when I first noticed the glass whisper. That's what I call it now, the whisper glass. It was a display case in the middle of the East Wing, containing a collection of turn-of-the-century tools and personal effects recovered from the courthouse ruins, a sheriff's badge, a pewter cup, some iron keys, and a cracked monocle. The glass had always been clean, almost spotless, like someone polished it every morning. But that night, when I passed by after hours, I saw words written in the condensation. Let them out. Just that. 4 words, finger-traced, perfectly centered. I stood there for a long time, waiting for the air conditioner to kick on or for the fog to fade, but it didn't. I wiped the glass with my sleeve, the letters smeared, and underneath, faint but still visible, there were more words, older ones, carved into the surface from the inside. We are still waiting. I remember whispering, "What the hell?" to no one. The museum was closed, lights dimmed, all doors locked. I could hear the quiet hum of the dehumidifiers in the next hall, but beneath that there was another sound, a faint tapping like fingernails on glass. I crouched, trying to see if something was moving inside the case, but all I saw was my own reflection, pale face, wide eyes, and behind me, the shape of someone standing too close. I turned so fast I almost fell backward. No one there. Just rows of portraits watching from the dark. I left early, Didn't even clock out. Walked the 6 blocks home with that cold feeling crawling up my spine like static. The next morning when I came back, the case was different. The glass was spotless again, no fog, no words. But one of the items inside had changed. The cracked monocle was gone. In its place was something I hadn't seen before, a small brass nameplate. It read, "Property of H.P. Lark, Ashford Courthouse, 1903." And beneath it, scratched into the metal, rough and uneven like with a nail, someone had carved, "Still Seeing." That night, I dreamed of the old courthouse on fire, and through the flames, I saw a man with bright, wet eyes, holding a monocle against the glass, whispering something I couldn't quite hear.
The museum was supposed to be closed that Monday. Power maintenance, Mr. Danner said. The electricians were rewiring the east wing. I showed up anyway, mostly out of habit, and because I didn't want to be home alone with my own thoughts. The front doors were unlocked. That stopped me cold. No cars in the lot, no sound inside, just that still air that feels like it's holding its breath. I stepped into the lobby, called out, "Mr. Danner?" My voice bounced down the hallways and came back flatter, like the building had swallowed the echo. Then I heard it. The faint sound of shoes scuffing the marble in the direction of the courthouse exhibit. I should have left. I really should have. But when you spend every day inside an old building, it starts to feel like it belongs to you, like a pet that doesn't love you back but tolerates your company. So I followed the sound. The lights were on in the east wing, all of them, and there were people. A whole group, maybe 15, 20 of them, standing in front of the portraits. They looked normal enough at first. Tourists in coats, murmuring quietly, listening to a guide who stood with his back to me. But something about the way they stood was off. Too still, not swaying, not shifting weight, not blinking. The guide turned his head slightly. His profile was sharp, clean-shaven, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. Then I realized why. He looked exactly like the man in the portrait, Judge Henry P. Lark. He was speaking softly, almost kindly. I couldn't make out the words, but his hand gestures were practiced, rehearsed. Every time he pointed to a painting, the crowd would tilt their heads in unison. I took a slow step back, praying the floorboards wouldn't creak. And then, one by one, the tourists turned their heads toward me. Perfectly synchronized. Not their bodies, just their heads. Eyes wide, glassy, pupils reflecting the overhead lights like camera lenses. I froze, couldn't breathe. The judge smiled, that same faint, dry smile from the portrait, and said, clear as a bell, "We thank you for keeping the doors open." The lights went out. I don't remember leaving the building. I came to standing in the parking lot, hands trembling, breath clouding in the cold. The museum was dark, locked up tight, all the lights off. The next day, Mr. Danner asked why I hadn't shown up for the maintenance check. Said the electricians had canceled last minute. Nobody had been there all day. I told him about the people, the tour, the man. He smiled politely, the way people do when they're trying not to laugh, and said, "You've been spending too much time alone in that place. It can get in your head." Maybe he was right. Except later that week, a school group came through for a morning visit. When they reached the East Wing, one of the kids tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Is that the man who gave the tour last time?" I asked what she meant. She pointed at the portrait of Judge Lark and said, "He told us about the fire.
said he was the only one who made it out.
After the tour incident, I started avoiding the East Wing whenever I could. I'd find excuses to stay in the gift shop, rearranging postcards, dusting shelves that didn't need dusting, pretending to do inventory, anything to keep from walking past that portrait. But then, one afternoon, Mr. Danner asked me to fetch something from the storage basement. "Couple of old signage boards," he said, "in the room behind the mechanical closet." He handed me a ring of keys, heavy and cold. "Don't stay down there too long," he added, with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. The basement was reached through a narrow iron door behind the staff elevator, the kind that looks like it should lead to a boiler room, not a museum. The stairs wound down into the dark, the air growing cooler and damper with every step. The smell hit me halfway down. Old plaster, rust, and something else, like rain-soaked fabric that had never dried. At the bottom, a single fluorescent bulb flickered to life when I pulled the chain. Shadows jumped across the walls, long, uneven, twitching. The hallway was lined with boxes labeled Archive, Unsorted, and Property Damage, Courthouse. The further I walked, the more the air felt pressed in, like the oxygen had weight. The mechanical closet door was marked with a warning, "Authorized staff only." The key that fit it was brass, with a curl of metal worn smooth by age. When I turned it, the door let out a sigh, like it had been waiting. Inside, there were old heater units, dust-choked pipes, and, on the far side, a smaller wooden door, half buried in concrete patchwork. A hand-painted sign above it read, "Jury Room, Do Not Enter." Except the paint looked fresh. I stepped closer. The door had no handle, just a narrow slit where something had once been pried open. As I knelt to examine it, I noticed marks along the frame, small crescent-shaped indentations. Fingernail marks, dozens of them. Something tapped once from the other side. Soft, slow, like a single knuckle against wood. I froze. My breath hitched so loud it seemed to echo. Then the tapping came again. 3 knocks, deliberate and steady. I whispered, "Hello?" because apparently I have no survival instinct. Silence. Then, in a voice barely audible, muffled by the door, a man said, "It wasn't my verdict." I stumbled backward, tripping over a pipe, heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I grabbed the box I was supposed to find, I think, and bolted up the stairs 2 at a time. By the time I reached the main floor, I was shaking. Mr. Danner was in his office, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. I told him about the basement, the knocks, the voice. He set his mug down and stared at me for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "There is no door behind the mechanical closet." I wanted to argue, but his face stopped me. There was something unreadable there, not disbelief, but fear, the kind that's practiced. That night, I looked up old records of the courthouse fire. 12 jurors trapped. Judge Lark presiding. They said the blaze started in the basement, an overturned oil lamp, a tragic accident. But one detail stood out. The only room never recovered was the jury chamber, and no bodies were ever found.
By the next week, the museum felt different. I couldn't tell if it was me or the building that had changed, but the air carried this strange vibration, almost like the hum before a thunderstorm. Mr. Danner stopped making eye contact when he spoke to me. He'd give short instructions, always about surface-level tasks, Clean the glass in the lobby. Restock the postcards. Don't go downstairs. That last one he said twice. So, of course, I started hearing the sounds. It began one morning, before opening. I was setting out souvenirs when I heard something that didn't belong. A faint scraping from beneath the floorboards, like someone dragging a chair slowly across a tile floor. The sound paused when I moved, started again when I stood still. I crouched near the vent grate by the counter. From down there came a low, rhythmic noise, a shuffle, then a pause. Then something that almost sounded like breathing. I pressed my ear closer, stupidly, and heard a whisper that sent a chill straight through me. "We're still deliberating." I fell backward, hit my elbow on the counter, and bolted to the hallway. My legs felt weak, my vision swimming. I told myself it had to be a pipe or the HVAC or a recording from the old courthouse exhibit somehow leaking through the vents. That night, I stayed late again, partly to test myself, partly because some part of me needed to know. Around 10 p.m., the building settled into that dead quiet that only old places have. The security lights flickered once, twice. Then, faintly, from under my feet, came that same scraping sound. I grabbed my flashlight and followed it to the east wing, where the wooden floors met the old marble tiles. The sound grew louder there, right near the corner where the portrait of Judge Lark hung. When I crouched down, I noticed something odd, a thin gap between the marble slabs, just wide enough to slip a fingernail into. There was light coming from below. I lay flat on the ground, peering into the crack, and saw movement, small flickers like candlelight swaying beneath the floor. I heard voices, too. Dozens of them, muffled, frantic, layered over each other like waves. "Guilty. No, it wasn't me. Let me out. He said the door was locked. He said—" Then, all at once, silence. A sharp bang shook the floor under my chest, like something heavy had slammed into the underside of the marble. Dust rose around me. And then I heard one clear voice, louder than the rest. "You opened the door." The light vanished. The floor went cold. When I looked up, the portrait of Judge Lark was different again. His hand, the one that had always rested on the arm of his chair, was now raised slightly, palm facing outward, fingers spread, almost like he was pressing against glass. I ran to Mr. Danner's office, but it was empty. His desk light was still on, and on top of a stack of papers sat the brass nameplate I'd seen in the display case, the one that said, "Still Seeing." Only now, another word had been etched beneath it, in fresh, uneven scratches. Listening.
The next morning, I came in early, hoping daylight would make everything seem less insane. It didn't. The museum felt hollow. The usual hum of the air vents was gone. Even the smell, that warm, old paper scent that used to cling to the walls, was missing. Instead, the place smelled faintly like burnt wood. Mr. Danner wasn't in his office. His coat was on the rack, coffee mug half full, but no sign of him. The office lights were on, though, and a drawer in his desk was cracked open, just enough for me to see what was inside. Old newspaper clippings. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The first headline read, "Ashford Courthouse Fire Claims 12 Jurors. Judge Survives." The article was dated March 3, 1903. Beneath it was another, older piece, no date, just the words, "Local man hanged for arson and murder." And under that, a black and white photo. The man in the picture looked eerily like Judge Lark, only younger. The caption read, "Deputy Thomas Danner, executed for courthouse fire." My breath stopped. I flipped through the papers and there were more. Yellowed memos, handwritten letters, even a photograph of the museum's opening day. There, standing in front of the ribbon with a shovel, smiling like a proud father, was Mr. Danner. The same face, the same sharp jawline, the same narrow eyes. Just 100 years too late. I heard the office door click shut behind me. "Find something interesting?" His voice was calm, but too calm, like someone forcing casualness through their teeth. I turned slowly. Mr. Danner stood in the doorway, still wearing that half-smile I'd started to hate. His clothes looked rumpled, his eyes sunken. "You shouldn't be reading those," he said. I stammered something, I don't even remember what, and started backing toward the hall. He stepped closer, shaking his head. "No, you've come this far, you might as well see the rest." He walked past me, toward the back wall of his office, and pressed his hand against a framed photograph of the old courthouse. There was a click, and a hidden panel swung open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Come on," he said. "You've already heard them. You might as well meet them." I wanted to run, but my legs didn't obey. Something in the air, that same heavy pressure from the basement, pinned me in place. He started down the stairs without looking back, his voice echoing upward. They never stopped deliberating. I just keep the place running for them. I followed. God help me, I followed. The staircase led to a small circular chamber beneath the east wing, the air thick with smoke and iron. The walls were blackened brick, and in the center stood a round table surrounded by 12 wooden chairs. 11 of them were empty. The 12th held something that looked human once, or maybe was just trying to. It wore a judge's robe. The eyes were glassy, the skin stretched tight. In its lap rested that cracked monocle. Mr. Danner placed his hand gently on the figure's shoulder and said, almost reverently, "They're waiting for him to sentence himself." The corpse's mouth twitched. The air filled with a low groan, not from the figure, but from everywhere at once. The walls, the floor, the air. A collective whisper, 12 voices layered together, saying, "Verdict, pending." The chamber walls seemed to breathe. I swear I could see the blackened brick pulse faintly in and out, like the room itself had lungs. My body screamed to leave, but my mind, or something in it, felt nailed to the spot. Mr. Danner was standing beside the judge's corpse, head bowed, whispering something under his breath that sounded halfway between prayer and apology. I managed to choke out, "What is this place?" He didn't answer me. He just reached out and adjusted the monocle in the figure's hand, turning it so the cracked lens caught the low light from the single hanging bulb. "History never ends. It just waits to be seen again." The bulb flickered once, and when the light steadied, there were people sitting in the chairs. Not full, solid people, just shapes. The suggestion of bodies made of ash and shadow, heads bowed, hands twitching in small, repetitive motions. The sound that came from them wasn't speech, it was the soft rustle of paper, over and over, like someone flipping a single page endlessly. Danner turned to me, eyes wide, voice trembling with something close to awe. "They can't rest until the 12th seat is filled," he said. "Every museum guide, every night janitor who's ever worked here, they all get called eventually. Some of us just last longer." My throat went dry. "What called for what?" He smiled thinly. "To deliberate. Then the whispering grew louder, the sound of many mouths moving behind thin walls. The air turned heavy, hot, my ears filled with that deep, throbbing hum I'd heard beneath the floors. I took a step back. The floorboards under me groaned. Something cold brushed my ankle, then tightened, fingers slick and strong wrapping around my leg. I screamed and kicked, but Danner didn't move. He just watched. The shadows were reaching through the gaps between the tiles, dragging me toward the table. I grabbed a chair leg, splinters biting into my palms, and for a split second, the world went completely silent. Then a voice, clearer than all the rest, spoke right beside my ear. "The defendant has returned." The judge's corpse lifted its head. The monocle fell from its hand, clinking onto the stone. And with that sound, every shadow in the room snapped to attention. Mr. Danner's face twisted into something between a grin and a grimace. He stepped backward into the dark and whispered, "It's your turn now." The last thing I remember before everything went black was the gavel on the table. It hadn't been there before. Slamming down once, the echo stretching on forever. When I woke up, I was lying on the lobby floor upstairs, covered in dust. The front doors were open wide, morning light pouring in. My phone said I'd been missing for 9 hours. Mr. Danner was gone, his office empty, the hidden panel sealed. But in the glass of the front display case, someone had written 3 words in the dust with a fingertip. "Court still in session."
For 2 days, I didn't go back. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that chamber. The ring of chairs, the way the judge's mouth had moved without sound, the touch of those cold fingers pulling at my leg. I thought about quitting, about packing up and leaving Ashford altogether. But by the 3rd night, my phone started ringing at exactly 11:47 p.m., the same time the latch used to click open. Unknown number, no voicemail, just silence when I picked up. Until the 3rd call. That time, there was breathing on the line. Slow, deliberate, and then, in that same echoing male voice I'd heard behind the basement door, a whisper. "The jury is waiting." I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall, the screen cracked, but even through the spider web of glass, the display still glowed. 11:47 p.m. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I drove to the museum. Don't ask me why. Curiosity, guilt, maybe both. The front doors were chained shut. First time I'd ever seen them that way. A yellow notice was taped to the glass. Ashford Historical Museum, temporarily closed for investigation. I asked a police officer standing nearby what happened. He said, "Some kind of break-in, maybe arson attempt. The curator's missing." "Mr. Danner?" I asked. He frowned. "No, ma'am. Mr. Danner died in 1974. Heart attack. Worked here back when this was first restored." I must have looked blank, because he added, "We found his photo in the office. Same man, right? That's his grandson, Daniel Danner. He disappeared last week." I didn't correct him. I couldn't. That night I dreamed of the East Wing again, but it wasn't empty anymore. The portraits were gone, the walls black with soot, and in the center of the room stood the table from the basement. 12 chairs, all occupied. One seat at the end was mine. The judge lifted his gavel and said, "All rise!" Every figure turned toward me, faces flickering in and out of focus, the tourists, the children, even the old photos from the archives. Every soul that had ever stepped through those doors. The gavel came down. I woke up screaming, my body shaking, and found something beside me on the bed.
A brass nameplate, the same one I'd seen before, only this time the inscription had changed again. H. P. Lark, presiding, and beneath it, newly etched, A. Collins, acting curator. That's my name. The next morning, the chain on the museum door was gone, and when I passed by on my way out of town, I saw a light glowing softly from the east wing, golden, steady, like candlelight behind frosted glass. I don't remember turning the car around. I just know I parked in front of the building, walked up the steps, and reached for the handle. It was already unlocked. The door opened easier than it ever had before. No groaning hinges, no resistance, just a slow, smooth swing, like it had been waiting for me. The museum was silent, not empty, though. I could feel movement in the air, that faint ripple of stillness that happens right before someone speaks. I walked through the lobby, my footsteps echoing on the marble. Everything was spotless. Even the glass displays were clean again, gleaming faintly under the emergency lights. The east wing door stood wide open. I could smell the faint metallic tang before I even stepped through, that same old penny scent that had haunted me from the start. The portraits were all back on the walls, except one. Judge Lark's frame hung empty. But the chair from his portrait, the tall carved one, sat in the center of the room now, and on it lay the gavel. I should have run, but there was something about that chair, a pull, deep and familiar, like the hum of blood in your ears when you know something terrible is inevitable. I picked up the gavel. It felt heavier than it should have, smooth and warm, as if someone had just been holding it. The air shifted behind me, a soft inhale, the rustle of coats. I turned. They were all there. The jurors, the tourists, the faceless shapes from the chamber. Every one of them standing in silence, ringed around the room. Their faces flickered in and out, some clear, some blurred, some burned, but all of them were watching me. And behind them, at the far end of the hall, the judge stood. Not quite solid, but close enough that the shadows clung to his edges. His eyes gleamed like wet ink. "You opened the door," he said softly. "You unsealed the chamber. You heard the verdict waiting to be spoken." I tried to speak, but my voice caught. "What do you want from me?" His mouth twitched in that almost smile. "Closure." He raised his hand, and the jurors stepped forward as one, forming a circle. I felt the gavel tremble in my hand, then lift slightly, as if pulled by invisible strings. "The 12th seat is filled," the judge intoned, "but every court requires a record. Every verdict needs a witness." The circle tightened. My vision swam. The air buzzed in my skull, the sound of whispers overlapping. Her fault, his fault, no one left the room, no one left, no one left. And then I realized what he meant. There had always been 12 chairs, but the 13th seat, the one that watched, the one that kept the story alive, was mine. The last thing I saw was the judge's shadow falling over me as the gavel came down, a sharp crack like thunder underwater. Then nothing. It's been 6 days since then, at least I think it has. The museum reopened. I saw the announcement online. New curator named in honor of local historian A. Collins. They even used my picture. If you visit the Ashford Historical Museum now, go to the East Wing. Stand quietly in front of the glass case with the courthouse artifacts. If you listen closely, sometimes you'll hear a soft tapping. 12 knocks, then one more. That last one's mine. And the sign beside the exhibit now reads, "Recovered from the jury chamber, 1903. Preserved under the care of the 13th witness."